All right, so this talk is about AMP outreach. And first of all, who am I? I'm the guy from the videos. Um, also, it is true. I head up AMP developer relations. My team and I are the bridge between the inside and the outside, I usually say. So we work a lot with all of you. We write documentation, we create the AMP YouTube channel, we do all of the conferences like AmpConf and the AMP Roadshow. So everything external facing. And then, of course, we also bring feedback back to the inside developers and engineers on the AMP team. So we are the bridge between those two worlds. Yeah.
Got the clicker to work.
Nice.
Yes. And as Joey gave a great introduction, I'm Crystal. I am the technical writer on AMP. I specialize in bad puns. Hopefully there's some really great bad puns coming up. So with outreach and building great things, one thing I tend to see a lot from developers is if you build it, they will come. I've built this really great thing. Everybody's going to find out about it. The world can't wait to use it. Not true. Just because you've built something really incredible and awesome and amazing and everybody's dying to get a hold of it, they're not going to find out unless you tell them about it. So developer advocacy is everyone's responsibility. Yes, even you, even as the developer themselves. And I hear a lot of excuses about why developers don't go out and do this advocacy and interact with the community. Like, but DevRel, I have nothing to talk about. Or DevRel, I'm just not a good writer to start blogging or do the reference documentation. Or DevRel, I just can't, I'm too shy. Also false. And a little secret, we're kind of a little shy too. So we're all in this together. And that brings me to ecosystems and community. AMP is a development ecosystem which interacts with the AMP community. And once you start using AMP or reading anything about AMP or even hear AMP for the first time, you're now a part of this community and you're a part of this ecosystem. And when you talk about ecosystems in nature, they bring up this thing called keystone species, which is when one species is kind of the keystone factor to that ecosystem survival. Personally, I don't believe in keystone species. Everything in that ecosystem is important to the ecosystem's success. And that's true in the developer ecosystem as well. We need the tech writers, we need the developers, we need the developer advocates, we need the users, and we need everything in between. And we all need to be involved in that ecosystem's community. So a couple ways to involve yourself in the community and to really get that ecosystem going is with documentation. So I'd like to walk you through some great documentation types and what really takes into making that documentation really user-friendly and readable. So knowledge is power. Documentation is kind of the priority zero to getting information to the public. And there's a couple things you need to know before you start writing documentation. And that first thing is to understand who it is you're writing for. So what is it that they already know? How familiar are they with AMP specifically? And at what level do you need to tailor that documentation? Do they have habits that have already been formed? And that's something we experience a lot with AMP in particular, with developers coming in from other frameworks like React and Angular. And those frameworks behave really differently than AMP. So a lot of that documentation kind of has to be like, how is this different from what you've experienced before? And then, is this for professional developers, people who are learning for the first time, decision makers and marketers? That's really gonna affect what terminology and language and direction you take that documentation. And then again, we wanna make sure that people aren't coming in thinking that Google is equal to AMP. So some of those articles may try to dissuade that assumption. So once we've figured out who we're writing for, we need to figure out why it is we're writing for them. What is it that they want to learn from this documentation? So some great questions is, what does it do? Why does the developer care? How does it work? How do I use it? And if there's a wow factor, I definitely want to know about it. And in general, we have three basic types of docs: reference, tutorials, and guides. And we're going to dive a little deeper into a couple of them. Well, all three. So reference documentation. If documentation is priority 0 of getting things to the public, reference documentation is the priority 0 of documentation. So JavaScript libraries really rely on comments in the code blocks to really explain how things work. But AMP doesn't use JavaScript yet. So we need to really make sure that documentation is explaining how things are working, how they're running, and really giving users an inside look on how it's working. And it has to be up to date at all times. We're constantly releasing new features, new versions, new updates, and we need to make sure that the reference documentation, the keystone to the documentation, is as accurate as possible. And that needs to be written and maintained mostly by the engineers. You guys are the ones creating these great things. You guys are the ones who are updating it. And the last thing we want is the documentation falling too far behind. You know it best. But feel free to reach out to tech writers, advocates, users. We can help you refine it, figure out where the missing holes are, and what other information we can put into it. So again, we're all in it together. So what goes into a good reference document? We need a good description of what it is the reference is about, basic requirements on how to use it, and a basic use case of why I would use it. And then if there's an advanced usage, something that we may not have thought of, but would possibly be common, I want to hear about that as well. And it's generally where we put the API information on a specific component. And if you really want to make some really great documentation on references, you can add these in for earned bonus points. And that is giving us the compatibility with system-wide events, functionality, and with AMP specifically, what other components they can interact with, and the best ways to do that. Also, if there's any existing guides, tutorials, videos, samples, any other documentation, if you can link out to that, that's really going to give readers a bigger picture of what it is they need to know. And tutorials. Tutorials are really a step-by-step journey into creating something that has a real-world use case. We want these steps broken down into iterative, bite-sized chunks, and that they build on top of each other to explain this process and how to get this end result. It's really great to sprinkle in there why something's being done and why we would do something before another thing. One thing that's really great with tutorials is a lot of people just kind of want to see the whole thing, how it works. So if you give us an option to just download it as a bundle, a lot of people will really, really appreciate that. And then guides. Guides are this journey that's going to demonstrate a couple different things, or maybe all of the things. So we want to demonstrate common use cases related to that guide, and then tell me how to achieve them. We're going to want to know a concept or a feature area, and you should tell me why I should care about it, and then how to do it. And then again, we always want to know those relationships between each components to really embrace that ecosystem. And bonus documentation type is videos. Videos are really great because you can kind of give this illusion of sitting next to the senior programmer, where you can just show even just like a screencast of your process of how you've developed something cool, a really neat feature, really cool page idea, how you've put a third-party service into it, showing us how it's done and explaining why you've done it real time in the video is one of my favorite ways to learn. And it also helps those other people who just don't learn from reading, who really embrace that teacher-student relationship. Video is a great way to embrace that without having to set up something like this. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul to talk about how to advertise with AMP, or advertise your AMP stuff.
Thank you, Crystal. Perfect. All right. You wrote the documentation. That's good. That's a great start. Which means that you're done here, right? So you shipped the reference docs, you shipped the component. Perfect. Everything is fine. Well, that's not the case, as we learned earlier in the intro. The first step here, actually, after shipping documentation and the code, is to tell everyone on the team, right? So everyone on the open source team, tell the tech writers, tell the developer advocates, tell the salespeople, maybe even tell the people in the elevator. Like all of those people might want to listen to your story or not, but yeah, tell as many people as you can about what you just did. Then tell the people outside of your team. So one good area to do this is on the AMP block. The AMP block is open for everyone who's contributing on AMP. So we share a lot of development stories there. And of course, you don't only have to publish on the AMP block. You can only also publish on your own Medium, on your own blog if you have one. All of these venues are fine. We have an ongoing series of what's new in AMP that we can slot your feature or your plugin in if you think it's not a whole topic that you want to cover in one blog post. You can also just always ask us to send a tweet from the official AMP Twitter account or use your own Twitter account to tweet. Obviously, nothing is stopping you from that, and I hope you're all tweeting a lot during those 2 days on what you learned. And then we also just started an AMP newsletter that you can subscribe to on ampproject.org, and we can always add whatever you think is interesting to a community to that newsletter as well. And then you can, of course, also hijack a Dreamforce cruise and invite everyone to do a big release party, which is very relevant right now. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty cool, but yeah, I don't know. And then, of course, developer events, right? So I think Ali looks very happy here on stage to talk about his component. And I think everyone should be happy to be on stage to talk about the feature component. Now, of course, if you have stage fright, that's very normal. And I have it, even though I have done thousands of events. You can speak at a local meetup if you want to do it on a small scale first. You can join an AMP roadshow. We're traveling around the world, giving one-day developer events. Always a good idea to join those, where you can not only give a talk, but you can also participate in the code labs, help out with them, or just hang out with developers. And then, of course, you can speak at a web developer conference, your choice. Just submit in a CFP and see if your talk gets accepted. And finally, at our flagship conference at AmpConf every year, we present the brightest and greatest in the world of AMP, the best new ideas, best case studies. So this is another good option to present what you've been working on if you've been working on something really meaty. Okay, so that was how to advertise your component or feature. But then how do you get others involved? And another way to describe this is, how do you stay in touch with your community? And a salesy person would say, how do you get to that product market fit? And so here we go. The first step here is to monitor and encourage incoming support requests. So you want to direct as many people as you can to file GitHub issues about your thing. You want to monitor and seed Stack Overflow, and maybe even monitor Slack for mentions of your feature component, so that you are staying in the loop for what people think about your component. Also, good ideas to meet users online. I know this has been mentioned in some of the other slides, but of course, Slack channel is a good option for this, just to proactively ask for feedback, but also to attend the design review meetings and maybe slot in a topic or just ask people there. And then you should also fix high impact bugs. Was there another slide? No. Okay. You should also fix high impact bugs and make sure that you prioritize what to fix. So if you know what your community thinks about what you just created, then you also probably know where the biggest pain points are. So like this hole here in this image, I probably want to patch before I do anything else in this room. So you should prioritize the things that impact users in the most negative ways. And then follow up with the most requested features and issues. So it's really urgent versus important here. That really matters. And then yes, you might also want to meet users in real life, which you're all doing today, which is great. This point here is also really important, right? I don't know if anyone understands what I'm trying to say here, but this is basically Ford's faster horse. So the thing is that you can ask a lot of users, and users are very good. Like users in this case are developers who use the AMP library, right? Developers who use the AMP library who complain about a certain thing, they're really good at describing the problem, but they're not really good at describing the solution usually. So if you listen to them one-to-one, you might not be implementing the right solution to the problem. So collect all the feedback, but then think about what the proper solution is to the problem, right? And so obviously Ford did not build this. He actually built a car. Okay, so now you involved a lot of people. How do you evolve your component from here? So this is one step on top of that. So you've been live with your feature or component for a couple months. Everything seems to be going well. Well, what do you do from here? Now, this is basically what I mean by this is you go from somebody filed a bug about my component, which is great, don't get me wrong, this is awesome, to, okay, I have 3 co-owners who all work on the same component and dozens of PRs incoming for that component, right? This is basically what we want, and this is why we're organizing the summit. This is the whole purpose. And one very obvious way to do this, this is always something I'm attempting, is to make it so you can read your own code in 1 year from now. What I mean by that is carefully inline document it, carefully structure it the way you think you can read it 1 year from now when you've forgotten everything about it. And that will help anyone else in the community to also read your code and invest time and energy into making it better. The other thing is do everything in the open. We've learned this lesson many times the hard way. It's also of how we started out, but as you can see with the topic that actually Joey is going to talk next about, the governance and many other things, the design reviews and so on, we're trying to be more open than ever to actually do nothing behind closed doors. So yes, if you work on something, I guess this is especially true if you're working for a company that does a lot of meetings in-house. Discuss the features and bugs on GitHub. There's really no reason not to until it's super sensitive security thing or whatever. But discuss them on GitHub. Organize Hangouts that everyone can join. All of these things are really worthwhile to do. Maybe even organize meetings. So WordPress, for instance, does this. WordPress organizes meetings on Slack, where they invite everyone to participate in a chat meeting, in a text meeting. That means people from different time zones can join, people who are not comfortable on video can join. So that's also a quite nice way to do things. Might work as well. So just be as transparent and open as possible. Also, GFI, of course, you really need good ground fault interrupters to make sure everything works well. This could also stand for good first issues. Okay, I think this is the one that I wanted. So good first issues, you've all learned about already, I think yesterday, but maybe today as well. The point here is not to follow them, because that's what you did yesterday if you've been here. The point is to actually write them. So if you've published something and you think there's a couple of low-hanging fruits that would be really good first issues, take some time and write them out so that someone else can adopt them. All right, finally, inclusion. Inclusion is a really important topic throughout the whole talk, and I wanted to double down on this again at the end to make sure that you're careful about, let's say, for instance, your language. So this can be really challenging as a as an English as second language speaker like myself. And so I'm always stumbling over words, but I'm also always using words that might not be very, very welcoming in the moment. So gendered pronouns is one of those examples. But another one is the use of the word just. You know, it sounds so easy, right? Just do something. Just do this. But the problem is it makes people sound dumb if it turns out not to be that easy. So just makes it sound like there's nothing involved, and I prefer not to use it. So there's these kind of things that you run over from time to time, and often the solution is to have someone else read whatever you wrote, your blog post, your documentation, and so on. So don't be too scared about these things. They will happen, and it's fine. But we will help you along the way, and we'll be happily reviewing your written documentation. Overuse of acronyms also falls in here. We are definitely guilty of this at Google. We actually have an internal service that we can use to look up words because it's so terrible. And also overly complicated vocabulary that maybe second language speakers don't know about. We also, this is actually something we ironically haven't added to our slide deck, I just realized, but that Crystal is working very heavily on, is localization. We are localizing all of our documentation and guides and tutorials into many, many languages. And we accept community contributions as well. So that's one interesting way to contribute, if you like. All right, one more important point. I asked you to blog earlier, right? And that's great, because I think all of you have interesting development stories. However, the key here is not just to blog about the outcome. If you want to be really transparent and inviting, then you really want to blog about the design and development phase, right? You want to blog about what went wrong, not just what went right, because that's the really interesting thing that people want to learn about. How did you pivot? How did you figure something didn't work and then went to the next solution? One good talk that comes to mind is Ali's talk about AMP animation at AmpConf, which you can watch on the YouTube channel. But he really went into the whole developer story of how he built the component, how they built the component, as opposed to just talking about, look how great this component is, allows you to do all of these things. And that makes it very relatable. And also prevents a lot of questions as follow-ups, which is like, why don't you support X? And yeah, well, I watched your talk and I know why. Finally, and so the first step you've already done because you're all here. A lot of us are introverts. I myself would call myself an introvert. I know this might sound shocking, but it's just it drains my energy, and I get my energy back the other way. And so when you're at conferences, when you're at real life events, it can be very daunting to start conversations with other developers. Turns out everyone feels that way, or a lot of people feel that way. And everyone appreciates a conversation starter. Can be really as easy as, and I know this sounds dumb, but it can be as easy as, you know, asking what was your favorite talk so far, or did you get the Wi-Fi to work, which is always a good conversation at a conference, or how's the jet lag? I think a lot of you have jet lag right now. Everyone wants to engage and talk about, you know, that's why people come to conferences, not just to watch the talks, but to actually figure out who else is in the same boat as I. How can I help? Like, how can I get involved in the community? So this is hard. This takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it's really draining, but I still encourage you all to do it. All right, finally, we arrived at the end, and we've went from documentation to advertising your plugin to involving others into building your plugin out further, or your component, and then finally evolving it in longer term to make sure that you're staying in touch with the community. All right, thank you.